Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and today it is the 14th of September, and we have especially a lot of news today from the Kherson region and specifically Kryvyi. So I'm going to be mainly just talking about that for today, but obviously I'll get into some other stuff. So the main news over here was that the thermal power plant in Kryvyi was actually damaged by Russian high precision strikes. And in addition to this, we also had strikes on this dam over here, which is called the Karachun Dam. And this is connected to the Inhulets River and to this reservoir over here, which is really just connected to the entire river system over here. And it does flow south as well over here, connected to the Black Sea and some other reservoirs and some other bodies of water over here. So the reason why this is so important is because you had 8 high precision missiles strike this area, and it just completely destroyed the dam, and now you're just having a overflowing of water about an additional 2 meters in height. And about 6 hours ago, the Ukrainian media, they were reporting that the water was leaking at a speed of 100 cubic meters a second. So it was at a pretty rapid pace. The reason why it sort of subsided is because of this. You can see that the dam is placed very close to these quarries over here. And you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have several of these quarries, especially this one over here. This one is very large, and some probably are as deep as like 50 feet, maybe even more. So all the water would probably just like flow into these areas, and then it would not affect the residential areas as much. So that's one reason why we didn't see as much damage, although there was a lot of damage that has happened and will continue to happen. I do think that this was a purposeful move by Ukraine. Like when they were designing all of these quarries, they purposefully put them right next to the dam in order to prevent as a severe of a leaking as possible. So look, you have some over here as well. You even have one near the center of the city, and you also have the entire industrial district right next to the reservoir. So this area is the most affected by the flooding. Originally, the river sort of looked like this, like any other river, but the flooding sort of expanded to the quarry area, obviously, into the Inhulets district, which is over here in the southern part of the city. And nobody really lives here, as I said. It's more so just a industrial district. So obviously it's going to hurt, first of all, the industry, whether it's like civilian manufacturing or military manufacturing, that's going to be impacted by this. And also this water treatment plant was affected, so you had a lack of tap water for the residents in the city. And the flooding obviously also spread towards the center where you have the Inhulets River. So it spread into this all these different micro districts around here that I'm going to highlight that I don't even want to try to pronounce. And the damage here was pretty high. You had a lot of videos showing how houses were being overflowed, and all these like restaurants and hotels right next to the river were just decimated by it. But the main reason for this isn't necessarily to ruin the civilian population's living conditions. It has much more of like a military purpose, because now it's going to be very hard for Ukraine to actually move troops from the area north of Kryvyi and pass them to the front line around Vysokopilia. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The more important thing that will happen now is that the river in general will be overflowing, and that will potentially destroy the pontoon bridges that are located over here near Andrivka, Lozove, Blahodativka, and Bilohirka. And if this were to happen, then you have the 35th Marine Brigade and the 36th Marine Brigades being isolated over here without any means of crossing back towards the mainland. And it's interesting how this happened a day after the assault on Davydiv Brid. So it's sort of as if the Russians were waiting for Ukraine to send in some additional forces before they did launch this strike on the dam. But an interesting thing to note is that the 46th Air Assault Brigade, which I talked about yesterday, it actually was transferred out of the fighting earlier today, just a few hours before the strikes, because of some heavy casualties they suffered, and they were just like being replenished around here in Beroj Nuhavate. So they were spared of any potential sort of isolation, but you still do have a large grouping of Ukrainians that could potentially be isolated over here by this, and this also just complicates any sort of other crossings Ukraine had planned along the Inhulets River. So again, it will be a logistical challenge for Ukraine, and we'll have to see if Russia continues doing this, because we saw how 2 days ago they launched the strikes on the Kharkiv thermal plants, the ones in Kremenchuk and Zmyiv, which obviously hurt the electricity situation in the eastern and northern parts of Ukraine, and just limited their production capabilities in general. So that was the sign of Russia actually starting to attack what can be considered critical infrastructure, because of how intertwined it is with the daily lives of Ukrainians, whether it be like electricity or water or any of these like basic necessities. They will be impacted by it, even if that's not the main intention. So this is something that they really should have done from the beginning if they were like really serious about destroying Ukrainian infrastructure and cohesiveness. But now they're doing it, and I don't think they're going to stop. They're going to continue doing this, these like attacks on specific civilian targets, which will have a qualitative difference in terms of what's going on in the battlefield. But I think they'll do this very selectively, just based on whenever it's the right place at the right time, and then they'll strike whatever areas they see fit. But it is sort of as if they're now allowing themselves some more leeway with these strikes than they were before, after the setbacks that occurred around Kharkiv. So I think all of these events are sort of intertwined in a way. Now, in terms of other events in the Kherson region that are farther away from the Inhulets River, we have fighting around Ternovi Podi, which is being fought over right now, right to the north of it, but no reported changes besides that to the front line. Again, you had the concentration of Ukrainian troops around this town over here, Novovozeneske, and they wanted to take Novopetrivka. Now that's going to be very difficult with the strikes that occurred on Kryvyi, which will sort of like put a wrench in whatever coordination there was between Kryvyi, Apostolove, because that's the main town that's being used to conduct the coordination with the front line over here. So in general, you might see whatever plans Ukraine had over here being stalled as a result, until they can get the situation under control. In the Zaporizhia area, you did have the Russian Telegram channels reporting on a Ukrainian assault. First, they built up equipment around Orikhiv and launched a two-pronged attack towards this town over here, Nestyryanka. And they say it was failed, and we don't really have any like confirmation that it fell or anything. But again, this might have been some sort of probing operation by Ukraine to see how heavily fortified this area is. They are very keen on finding some sort of weak point in the Russian lines around here, which is why they've now sent new recon equipment towards the Zaporizhia area. Maybe they're planning some sort of like pincer maneuver over here to reach Mirny, just based on their sort of actions over the past few days. But of course, this is subject to change based on whatever sort of fortifications they find during these probing operations. But again, there is still a looming threat of a Ukrainian offensive operation around here. So just keep an eye out for that. Nothing really to update in the Donetsk front, but I did change the marking of Mykolaiivka to red. So now DPR, they say that they've taken over Mykolaiivka, Druha, and the other Mykolaiivka. So now they're on the southern outskirts of Odradivka, and given the fact that it's not that large of a settlement, only like one or two streets with houses, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think Ukraine will even put up much of a fight over here, but they will probably put a lot of resources and fighting into Zelenopilia, Kurdiumivka, and Ozoryanivka. So again, that's the main focus now, and I do think that they'll start. The Russians will start assaulting these three towns once they fully take over Zaitsev, because this suburb of Zaitsev over here, which is called Bakhmutovka, named after the river, is actually still contested. You still have Ukraine fighting over here. So once the Ukrainians are expelled from this area and Russia reaches the highway over here in between Bakhmut and Donetsk, they can actually start finally assaulting these three towns. In the Seldolina Zaitsev area, I finally fixed the map, so now this is way more accurate. This is how the front lines actually look like now. I also changed it around Bakhmut and Solidar just to make it look cleaner. So I'm going to be doing the same thing to the rest of the map as over the next few days when I have time. The Russians, they're still reporting about heavy fighting in Bilohorivka, which does indicate that there was some sort of Ukrainian breakthrough over here. And we obviously know that the video was geolocated to this area. So it's possible that it changed hands over the past few days, but we don't have any like information contradicting what I said yesterday. So I am keeping it under Ukrainian control for now. But it seems as if Russia, they're sending a lot of reinforcements specifically to this area now because of their withdrawal from Kharkiv, just to hold the line over here. Because if they actually are located in this area, they're only like 5.5 miles from Lysychansk and 8 miles away from Severodonetsk. So clearly there is a threat, but I think that now you have the regular Russian army being moved into this area just to keep Ukraine from making any breakthroughs for the time being. Now, the same thing sort of applies for Liman, where there was a video of Russian convoys being sent in the direction of Liman, Yampil, and Dibrova in order to hold the line, and these are actually regular army formations, which we didn't actually see in Liman for a while because it was mainly just like National Guardsmen and LPR militiamen, and also you had these Bar reservists that were sent in, and these are not the best forces. They did sufficiently well in holding off any sort of like head-on assault on Liman, but it's not a sustainable defensive garrison. So now reinforcements are being sent in, and you have the new BTGs created in Chechnya, which are being sent into the front lines, and I would bet that some of them will be moved into the Liman area specifically. Now, again, in the Sviatohirsk area, it's basically fully under Ukrainian control by now. I don't know why the map looks like this. I need to change it to mark it as all blue, but the Russians, they're gonna try now to hold a new line around Yarova and Drobisheve, Sosnove. That's really their new line for the moment, since they gave up on Sviatohirsk and all the areas in these forested areas, even parts that are east of the Donetsk River. So there might be some like new front line that stabilizes over the next few days, but you could see Ukraine advance a little bit north in that area as well. Now, really no reported like Ukrainian assaults along the Oskil River, which is understandable given the width and the depth of the river. But we did have reports of cross-border skirmishes around this town over here. Was mentioned specifically Shebekino. So you do have a border crossing over here. So there was probably some fighting over here. And there was also fighting reported in the village around Vergilivka. So this is par for the course. You have very similar things occurring for months now in the Chernihiv region and even more in the Sumy region. It was mainly just cross-border skirmishes and some mortars and shelling, but it doesn't really change much about the underlying facts of the matter in terms of the course of the war. So you can expect to see some heightened fighting in the area just south of Belgorod, but that's all it will be. There won't be any sort of like escalation in this front for a while. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, which is I will warn you is unconfirmed, is what happened in the peninsula over here, which is called the Kinsburkaya Strip. So previously, Ukraine actually did have a presence here for a few months after the beginning of the war. Their special forces were operating in here on and off because there was a national park. It was hard to clear out all the Ukrainians from here, but eventually by the beginning of summer it was eventually fully cleared. There was some sort of reported assault. The Ukrainians had previously mined all of this area over here, this entire like estuary, I guess you can say, the Gulf area as well. And now there was reports from the Russian side of things, no evidence yet, that 5 motorboats of Ukrainian special forces landed on the strip of land, and they were forced to retreat under heavy artillery fire by the Rosgvardia troops and the VDV paratroopers. So that is interesting. Maybe this is another part of the Kherson counteroffensive that Ukraine wants to tap into. They want to like expand the field of operations just south of Kherson. Um, the Dniprovska Gulf is really just contested, but Ukraine, since they have in mind, they can probably maneuver more easily around here. But actually setting up a landing will be very difficult, and actually solidifying like a bridgehead that can like sort of flank Russian forces is very unlikely, but maybe that's what they're going for by attacking this area, because you can see that if you take over this national park area, there's like a few settlements, and then you actually reach the Dnipro River just adjacent to Kherson. So that's something that's pretty interesting. But that's it for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.